Hello, and welcome to this Guess Who's Back edition of the Purple Journal podcast. Our world traveler, Mr. Joe Oberle, is back in the house after, I think it was 2 weeks, but it felt like 2 years away from the show.
Wow, I think that's a good thing. I since I was an expatriate for a couple weeks, I'm going to make it my patriotic duty to give updates during this podcast on the World Series. Oh, wait, it won't be posted till tomorrow, so never mind. Anyway, I'm back.
Is Game 7 on right now?
Yes, it is, Joe. Oh. That's how you schedule these things. During wild hockey games and World Series, for crying out loud.
You guys want to
come? It's not much of a game so far.
I was going to see if you had anything early February, if you guys wanted to come over and do a wine tasting. Maybe that's second Sunday. But yeah, man, you're back. I think you were in Switzerland for some reason.
Well, I was in Germany. My cousins had traced our lineage and found our ancestral home, and we visited that. And then we went to France for a couple days for my wife's birthday, and then on to Switzerland, which I spent the entire time in a water closet since I got food poisoning in France. And while in Switzerland, I put the Luce back into Lucerne during that period. But that's then back to Heidelberg and home. I couldn't stay for the Vikings game in London. Would have liked to, but that would have required another loan from the bank. But so I was over there, and it's good to be back.
It's great to have you back. Joe writes for us, the purplePTSD.com website, I think is how the kids are saying it. And he also writes for the Sports Post. And he is here with Luke Braun, which sounds like he might have an ancestral home in Germany, too, with the last name like Braun. Are you a German, Braun?
I don't know. I might.
You gotta be. That name.
Who knows what I do when I black out in college?
Yeah, Luke writes for purplePTSD.com as well, and he's the co-host of the Pocket Protectors podcast as well for all of you analytics nerds or just football in general nerds.
Yeah, we took a bye week this week due to Halloween and family and illness factors, but we'll be back next week.
'Tis the season.
Got pocket protected. That's Luke. He's the man. He's got your pocket protected.
You gotta go.
Call me Riley Reef.
Very nice.
So, Joe, you've been obviously gone the last couple of weeks. What are your thoughts on this Vikings team in your absence? I mean, you've been doing some writing too, but wow,
got to manage those expectations and hopes. Just keep them cool. This is the OG coming in with the as I said in my story, a wet blanket. But it's. How many weeks ago on this podcast where we was the dread at an all-time high when Dalvin Cook went down, and here the Vikings are back 6-2 and Kings of the North, and everybody's talking about that hometown Super Bowl, and we just have to you hear him tap the brakes and all. A guy I used to work with said diesel down. I like how you ever hear a truck when they're going downhill, they go into a lower gear. Diesel down a little bit here, folks, because it's a long season. The Vikings are doing, despite the fact that they've had some significant injuries, they've survived them, and there's going to be more. It just happens in this league, so you don't know what's going to happen. And the schedule's tougher in the second half, so I'm going to say, take them one game at a time and enjoy the season, to quote old Mike Tyson.
I don't remember any negativity a couple weeks ago.
You don't?
No.
Blocked that out, did you?
No, I've been the half glass full the whole time. No, I'm that guy. I'm not gonna. It's pretty obvious. I can't even pretend that's not true, but. I guess as the guy that represents the emotional side of football on the show, which is as a semi-rational person in my day-to-day dealings, is kind of a hard position for me to take. I just, I feel like logically, yeah, we should probably temper our expectations because it's the Vikings.
Just a little.
It's the middle of the season. and everything, but at the same time, I've said this a million times this year already. What else do we have to live for, you know? Like, let's live it up.
Jesus.
We never actually get there, so let's pretend like we're going to get there, and let's really...
you got something before, Joe. I saw you got
yeah, I got secrets. This is all a front. I'm living the life of a king.
You just, I mean, I'll never forget how I felt watching that 2009 championship. I had people over, and I said, you know, we're going to just enjoy this, and because the Vikings are going to the Super Bowl again for the first time in how many years, and you'd heard all along, people said, oh yeah, Brett Favre's going to break your heart, and I just said, no, it's not. That stuff just
coming off that big blowout win,
it does, and it did. And I'm standing there in my living room with all these people standing around me in shock. And I'm saying, well, you can't do that. It's football. It's the greatest thing about this league. It's so unpredictable. Stuff happens. And the more you know about it, the less the more you understand that stuff happens. So enjoy it week by week, and yeah. You know, remember that they just beat Cleveland, and try not to get too high.
I'll say that I won't be really writing any articles about us going to the Super Bowl. I might write something about if we had Bradford, we'd go to the Super Bowl, like theoretical stuff that I can't be proven wrong on since I'm wrong about everything else. But I'm all for living it up in these moments because we keep learning week to week that those moments don't last very long. But there's truth in that. I mean, we've beaten a lot of teams that aren't very good and that have been very, very beat up too. So it's
6-2 last season, and this team finished 8-8. I still can't believe it happened, but it did.
5-3 last season.
Yeah.
Pardon me?
We were 5-3 last season. We were 5-0 and then lost 4 straight.
Oh, all right. Well, close enough. 5-0.
Can I try to set some reasonable expectations? Because I think Super Bowl or disappointment is a weird way to look at football. I think that AJ nailed it a couple weeks ago when he said, knock out, take care of business against the Ravens and the Browns. We've done that, and then split the rest of the way. 4-4 the rest of the way gives you 10-6. That probably gives you the division, and then you're in the dance, right?
Yeah.
And I think that that's really plausible. Looking at the rest of the schedule, we have the Redskins, the Panthers are ailing a lot. The Falcons have a lot to figure out, although I think they will figure it out by then. A Packers team that may or may not even have Aaron Rodgers. The Bears at home, we should be able to win that. We could even steal the game at Ford Field. Finding 4 wins in the rest of the schedule doesn't seem to be that tough. And maybe we'll blow one that we shouldn't blow, and maybe we'll upset a team we're not supposed to upset. But I think it's reasonable to set an expectation at 4-4 the rest of the way, considering like what Steve Sarkisian is doing to the Falcons. I think we could steal that game. And once you're in the dance, you're in the dance. I think I really want to win a playoff game, but you also have to understand that by setting your expectations at Super Bowl or disappointment, there's so much variance in a single elimination playoff format. You could be the best team in the playoffs and lose in the first round. That has happened many times. The first example I think of is the 15-1 2011 Packers. They were the best team in the league that year by far, and they didn't win a playoff game.
That was awesome.
Yeah, it was really great. So, there's a lot of variance in the playoffs. So setting your expectations at Super Bowl or bust, or trying to say that, if they don't win the Super Bowl or if they don't win a playoff game, they really weren't good after all. Now, if you get in the dance, anything can happen, good or bad. And I think that we can have a reasonable expectation for this team to make the playoffs. If they don't make the playoffs, that means that they blew it and something went wrong. And just like last year, that means that they regressed and started playing worse than they're playing now. And that would be a miss on our expectations.
Definitely, especially with what's going on in the division this year. It's a little bit different than last year. I know the Packers started off pretty rough last year and then kind of figured things out as the season went on, which they tend to do.
Seahawks too.
Yeah, but it just seems like, with Rodgers out, that even an 8-8 record this year might be enough to win the division, depending on what the Lions end up doing.
I mean, yeah. Do you look at that schedule and see 2 wins on it? I just don't see it. I just see this team having a winning record.
Yeah. But speaking of which, we do have some games coming up after the bye against some of the NFC teams that we struggled against in recent years, like the Redskins, who are playing okay, and the Rams are kind of a surprise team this year that I don't think a lot of people expected to be playing very well that are. What do you guys see from the rest of the NFC in terms of not only the schedule, but just in terms of competition come playoff time?
I'm really glad we got the Saints out of the way, because I think if we ran into them later in the year, after they seem to have figured a lot of things out, and I think if we ran into them later in the year, it would have been a much harder game than it was week one. The Rams are interesting, but it's a young team, and young teams in the playoffs tend to have issues. So
we'll find out a lot about them in a couple weeks when they come to US Bank Stadium. I really think that'll be a good test for the Rams, but it will be definitely a good test for the Vikings if they can really hold serve with them and do something. I think that will say a lot going forward.
That's a really fun one.
I fully expect that if the Vikings do not beat the Lions on Thanksgiving, that is going to be a bad thing. They should have beat them the first time at home. The Lions have struggled since, and I know they always play well that weekend, but this time they got to go down. I mean, the Vikings are the better team, and they have to take them. I think they'll beat the Falcons, and Carolina. Who knows who shows up there? But the one that concerns me a little are the two teams that are right there with them are the Eagles and the Seahawks. They're going to be tough beats. So you want to get the home field advantage. So I think the Vikings really have to be playing for that. For those.
I agree. I think I'm worried about the Saints too in a rematch. I think that could be a really, really tough game if they keep it up and end up having another one in another game against us, because they're going to be a much different team than we would have played week one. So that one worries me. And then obviously the Eagles. They are a very complete roster, and there's not a lot of weaknesses there to attack.
And you think they just got better?
Traded for a cancer though?
Ooh.
Yeah,
I think they traded for a guy who escaped a cancer.
Yeah, it could be. I mean, I
think Miami's a big old cancer.
Yeah, there's both signals coming out of that, trade that a lot of the Dolphins were happy to see him go, and because he didn't want to play ball, but we'll see. And now you got I saw a quote from what's his name, who's the running back that's there right now? Used to play for the Patriots last year. Big bruising. Who's the guy? But he just, for the Eagles. He said that I can control what I can control. So I don't think he's entirely geeked that they just traded for a starting running back in Philadelphia. So we'll see.
Yeah, and they had that injury to their left tackle. I think that people there were freaked out about a little bit, but looks like they're trying to improve and go for it. So who knows? Maybe we'll get a Vikings-Eagles NFC Championship and see which team can finally, in my lifetime at least, make it to the Super Bowl. Well, no, the Eagles made it. They just lost. Anyway,
I do think that we probably, I don't know. I see of the teams we've talked about. I think if my count's right, that's 5 teams that are probably worthy of the play. We might have a weird one that sneaks in. That doesn't really deserve it, like a weird Lions team that's just like an easy one and done, or an ailing Panthers team or something like that. And then we're gonna have, between the Seahawks and the Rams, undoubtedly a really, really tough wild card out.
What about the Cowboys? The Cowboys should make it, depending on how Zeke comes out in his appeal, but
that's gonna be weird. I could see them ending up, kind of on the wrong side. I don't know. I could see them being the 6th team too. That would be interesting. Although if all of this legal stuff happens and then they're missing Zeke for the playoff game, that would be kind of the worst case scenario, huh?
Right.
I thought that there was going to be like a ruling today or tonight about that.
There could have been. I haven't seen it yet. It was possible that it could have been as soon as tonight, but they're hoping that it will come before the week, and so that they can, before Saturday, so that they can he can play on Sunday. But it's all up in the air right now. And it's unfortunate. I have him on my all 3 fantasy teams, so I got a little bit tied up in Ezekiel Elliott. So.
Yeah, and as long as we can avoid the Lions, in any capacity outside of the second game, I'd be happy since they seem to have our
I want to knock him out of the playoffs.
So do I.
I want to get him. I want to be
that whole
just
thing.
Kill him. Yeah, I want to be the 3rd seed, play him as the 6th seed, have him come into US Bank Stadium and get killed, and we win a playoff game. That's what I want.
That works.
I'm sure Zimmer wants it too.
It's shaping up for a really good second half. I mean, the Vikings' schedule is tougher. They're gonna, and it's the bottom line for me has always been you always want your home team to win every year, but you better be ready to play the best because that's what you're gonna meet in the playoffs. So you might as well be tested by these difficult teams, and it's why the second half sets up well for the Vikings. They're gonna see who they really are and see if they deserve to be in the playoffs and gain some confidence from beating some decent teams. If they do that, then they go rolling into the postseason with a lot of momentum, and who knows what happens.
I hope that we come out of the bye a little healthier too, because there are some dings on some guys. Diggs still probably wasn't 100% in that Browns game.
And we don't know what happened to Everson because they don't say, but he's holding.
He seems fine. He was tweeting that he was all good. He was walking around after that game with no trouble. And I mean, we'll see when there's an actual injury report, but it doesn't seem like that's going to be a huge thing. But yeah, either way, he's got 2 weeks to. If it is something, he's got 2 weeks to heal from that. Reef is going to be better. We can get Mike Remmers through the concussion protocol. Yep. All these little dings and stuff that we had like a dozen players on the injury report. A lot of that is going to come. We'll have our pick of left guards. I don't know if we want to stay with Easton or Isadora. Probably Easton because Isadora wasn't that good.
Should get him back. That and the bye couldn't have come at a better time for this team. It's halfway through the season and get him right.
So the big storyline going into the bye and probably for the second half of the season, obviously, like that's pretty much dominated the first half of the season, is the quarterback stuff. Luke wrote an article this week, I believe on Tuesday, about Case Keenum and his production as a starter. And fans seem to be all over the place on this, which is not really that different for Vikings fans. But
people are making up a lot of interesting lies about Case Keenum to justify the fact that they really don't like Teddy Bridgewater.
That sounds about right.
I would agree with that. It's a curious thing. We go by how many weeks without hardly not too many people responding, and then all of a sudden Luke puts this article out there about a realistic view of Case Keenum and how he's been as a starter, and it hasn't been all great. It's been in the win column. It's been wonderful. Luke, we talked weeks ago. If you go 2-2 with your backup, you're doing great. He's gone 5-1 or something like that.
I would call it 5-2 and give him credit for the Bears game, even though it technically wasn't a start. So that's great. That's what you want. But you look at it closely, that the defense has a heck of a lot to do with that. The running game, which behind that offensive line, which is improved, has a heck of a lot to do with that. And so does Case Keenum. There's no question about it. But if you look at him piece by piece, he has not been the godsend that some people are making him out to be. He's had plenty of warts, and he's got his limitations. You have to take that into consideration when you evaluate him, and you did. And I just think some of this vitriol that came that article's way is placed from coming from somewhere else, and I'm not sure I quite understand it. I think,
so what was the consensus of your article first, so people know?
Yeah, the article, go read the piece for more in-depth stuff, because I went really in-depth with him statistically, and there was a lot of film review in there. But roughly, I would say that the most optimistic way you can look at Case Keenum is he's about as good as Teddy Bridgewater. And the most optimistic. And to get to that optimism, you have to make a bunch of assumptions. The biggest one being that his supporting cast now and Teddy's supporting cast last time we saw him play in 2015 are of equal quality. And that's just false. That you cannot make that argument. You also have to assume that the rest of Case Keenum's career isn't who he is, and in fact this is who he is, the way he's playing right now, which is also fairly unlikely to be true. We've got 5 years of other data on him in Los Angeles and Houston and so on, and he was not as successful as he's been here, and I think that there's a lot of merit to that information. And those are like two huge assumptions you have to make to get Case Keenum to the level of, yeah, he's probably about as good, maybe a shade worse than Teddy Bridgewater. I don't think Case Keenum offers anything to the game that Teddy Bridgewater can't do at least as well, if not better. I mean, some of Case Keenum's best assets are his ability to evade pressure in the pocket. He's amazing at that. That's maybe the one thing that he's probably a little better at Teddy, but I do think Teddy is better at turning pressure into positive plays, because evading the defender is one thing. Actually getting a positive play out of that is another thing entirely, and I think Teddy's a little better there.
I have to take one umbrage with that, because we just don't know what we have in Teddy in his current ability to evade pressure. That's all I'll say. While I agree with you, and what you're saying is absolutely correct. If Teddy before the injury versus Keenum now, well, it is such an unknown.
The article kind of has that caveat saying, like, we kind of have to just like think about this, assuming that Teddy Bridgewater is healthy, because if he's not, that decision is easy. And we don't have to talk about it if he's not. But if and then I guess I just want to talk a little bit about this whole hot hand argument and the if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
I was going to ask about that too.
I think we have to have a much more sentient idea of what it ain't broke means. If we're winning, that doesn't necessarily mean the quarterback is playing well, and I feel like we can be like sentient humans when we watch football and like understand that. I don't think it should be so. It like assumes that there's this like shroud of mystery around why we're winning, and if we pull Case Keenum, was he the reason? Like, he very clearly is not the reason. Anyone watching with any sort of critical eye can tell you that. It's like if you open up the hood of a car and it's like you or me, and I don't know that much about cars. I'm not a mechanic. I probably am not going to start pulling things out because, hey, the car runs and I'm not going to mess with it. But if you're a mechanic, and you have to think of the Vikings as a mechanic, and that means that we as fans should think like a mechanic, and you know what's going on with it, you can say, oh, it needs an oil changer, oh, it needs more transmission fluid or whatever. Then you do that and not say, well, it's still running, we'll only fix this when the car breaks. That doesn't make any sense to me. I'm not going to sit there and wait for Case Keenum to cause a loss when we have a better quarterback sitting on the bench.
And
it's not that hard to prove that he's a better quarterback. So
using that analogy also, I think it depends on what you want the car to do. If people just want the car to make the playoffs and go one and done or whatever, that's one thing. But if they want it to be a race car that can win the NASCAR Sprint Cup or whatever they call it, you have to look at ways to improve as the season goes on, and I feel like at some point the Vikings are going to play a team that don't allow them to start out as badly as they've started the last couple weeks, going into halftime and kind of being a tale of two halves 2 weeks in a row. I think the defense has been playing well enough for them to not come from behind, and this offense isn't really built for that, coming back from a lot of points down either. But at some point we're going to need to, and that's been my thing with the Bradford thing, is there's so many opportunities, or we could be doing so much better, even though we're doing great, that down the road I just fear that that's going to come up to bite us. And so that's my working logic in regards to
Luke.
The whole
Furthermore, thing. I mean, you mentioned the caveat of whether or not he's healthy, and to me that's one thing. That's a completely separate thing. Is he not the same quarterback? Because that knee was destroyed. That leg was destroyed. We just saw what Zach Miller went through this week. Who knows if he'll ever first get his leg back, next walk, then play football, whatever. He could be healthy as he's going to be, and it still might not be who he was before the injury. And that is what I think they're trying to determine. You have to be able to protect yourself. You have to be able to make all these moves. You have to be able to your knee has to respond at the same speed and level as it did before in order to be Teddy as he was. We just don't know that yet. So I think that's a huge concern. It's got to be what they're weighing more than anything, because he's bulked up. He's probably got a stronger arm now. There's ways he's probably improved. His brain is still the same. But, I just go back to my own experience of 5 knee surgeries. It's not the same knee. It's just not, and I'm not at that level where just seconds of of these huge athletes that are chasing him down might be enough for him not to be able to play the game like he did. And that's what I think is the biggest mitigating factor here. And it's the biggest thing that you got reasons why Zimmer's saying we'll see, and Spielman is saying, well, we're not going to put him out there if he can't, he's not ready to play. And they're all kind of hedging because they've probably seen some of this. And, I remember seeing him when I saw him at practice when he first was back weeks ago, and he just didn't seem to have the pop to me at that time. Now that's a good month and a half ago, but I'm just waiting to see how that happens and what the final result is or analysis of that is. That's my point.
I think even if he does lose some mobility, a lot of his prowess at evading pressure wasn't necessarily his ability to scramble and cut or anything like. He wasn't a running back there. It was his awareness of the pocket and his ability to make the right choices and kind of maybe roll out a little bit. You don't need to be as athletic as he was. It was great that he was, but you don't need that much mobility so long as you can move a little and feel the pocket. And I still think he'll, the mental ability to feel the pocket, while it might be a little rusty to start, like he's always had that. And I think even if he's a little bit less mobile than he used to be, which is fairly likely, I still think that he's far and away a better quarterback than Case Keenum, if only because he can hit 10-yard passes without sailing them into interception range.
That may be, but they keep saying about protecting yourself because ultimately you put him back in there. If you can't do that, he's going to be, sometimes your mind's writing checks that your body can't cash, and if you get injured, they're gonna waste a lot of money by activating him if he can't protect himself. So I mean, these things all. This is a very difficult decision coming up, and when you throw the Bradford thing in there and the unknown there, this is I don't think we've ever seen this kind of dilemma at the position. It's to me unprecedented.
Yeah. I'd also argue that they know a lot. I would say that they know a lot more about these things. They're all total unknowns to us. If I were asked to go make that decision about Teddy, I'd be like, I don't know, I haven't seen him. But they've seen a lot more of him. They've got a lot more doctors' information about him. So I think they have the information to make that decision. I do think it's highly unlikely that he goes to IR at the end of this week. I think they're kind of making sure all their ducks in a row, sending him to another doctor, and being ultimately very sure. But if he just goes back on IR and then doesn't play for the whole season, and that probably means that he is done in professional football in general. And I don't see that being the scenario or the case. I think you have to at least put him on the roster, right? And starting him is a totally different thing, but you got to at least put him on the roster. And you can IR Jeremiah Searles or something, or IR Sam Bradford actually might be how that plays out.
Despite the contract ramifications of doing so.
What contract ramifications of IRing some of? I
mean, if they put him on the roster, if they activate him, then there's something about his tolling.
Oh, the tolling of the contract?
Yeah.
I think they've completely forgotten about that possibility. I think they want him. I mean, everything we've heard coming out of that camp is, for the last 4 weeks, is saying we think he's going to be ready and we're ready to do it, and we don't, It doesn't seem as though that is what they'll do. Yeah, if he does go back on IR, he does toll again. Mm-hmm. And I guess that would be how that plays out.
It's just something else to consider,
Yeah, I don't foresee that just based on the way that they've been acting. I mean, they've been very cautious, and that is smart. But I guess it doesn't indicate anything to me, because whether or not Teddy is going to play, it's still the right decision to be cautious. There's no scenario where being cautious would be the wrong decision, which means it doesn't explain it doesn't offer any information, the fact that they're being cautious.
Yeah.
Oh, I get what you mean.
It's an incredible decision that they're faced with.
It is very difficult.
Yeah, it's almost every possible variable that could exist exists. The
it's
contract,
very weird.
Bradford could still be out there.
I know. What's up with Bradford? How about that?
I think he has arthritis. I think Lieber's right. He has arthritis, and I don't think he touches a football field again.
Ever?
Oh,
I think he retires. Yeah.
Well,
it sucks. It really sucks, because I was really rooting for him, but I really think his problem just from the cumulative damage has become degenerative, and that doesn't heal over time.
You wonder if he doesn't go back on the field this year and then waits to get a contract next year and get the one more contract, and I'm sure it would be incentive laden, but man, that's too bad if that's the case. I mean, arthritis, yeah, I've got bone on bone. You get it.
You think that
I'm sure it affects you, but I would think there's some kind of pain thing they can do to take care of that. But
you
whatever.
think that they would be able to definitively say that though, like go in and see what his cartilage levels are or something, like and I know
they can't without opening him up.
Yeah, that's what
you can't do it with an MRI. You can't just open up the knee and look at it.
Well, you can stick a scope in there, but that still has recovery time.
Yeah.
Which is probably what they need to do, but yeah, obviously they haven't done that.
Oh, I'm sure they know from his last surgeries exactly how much cartilage he's got left. However much there's records of what was snipped out. So, I mean, you can you can determine that. It's just a matter of, in fact, you can probably go, you might not be able to determine how bad the arthritis is once you get in there, and bone spurs can build up. So. They can see a lot, but I wonder if the whole thing, it just seems like he's I don't know if he wants to get out there, his agent doesn't want him to. I don't know. I always think about the contract end of it and wonder how that plays into it. And he's playing for his career, as Luke May said, just speculate. It's very possible.
I think he understood the gravity of that he's like playing for his career, and I think that's why, because it sounded like he was the one pushing the most for him to go out in the Chicago game, which was clearly a mistake.
Yeah, that was the report. Yeah.
So I think the pressure of contract and just his whole career situation is what made him maybe push a little too hard for that and give the coaches bad information. Because if the coaches knew that he was going to play like that, they obviously wouldn't have put him out. So something misled them in that, and I think that would have been Bradford. So I don't think he's going to be just sitting back. Like, I think it's probably torture for poor Sam to not get out there.
Absolutely.
And what a tragic career.
Yeah.
No shit. No kidding. God.
So we've effectively, I was so excited at the beginning of the show, and now I'm basically speechless and down to making noises. And that's really what our goal is at the Purple Journal podcast.
Here's what I'll give you before we move on to the Browns recap with Jonathan. I think Teddy comes back. I was thinking Washington or Los Angeles. I'm now a little bit more confident that he'll be back for the Rams game, and he comes back in front of his home crowd, plays the Rams, beats the Rams, and all of this is behind us.
I hope. I just worry that he's going to be rusty and the team's going to go into a funk. And
is that your prediction? Is that for your prediction?
Luke?
Ooh, I should make like a season-long bold prediction. Yeah, Rams game. Teddy comes back, plays through the rest of the year. Boom. There's my bold prediction for the bye week.
And I'll be dead by the playoffs. Based on how this is going. But yeah, we also, Jonathan Kinsley from Brick Ball Blitz was on the show
last week. Blitz.
Brick Wall Blitz? See, that's what I thought it was, and I thought it was a 3Bs.
Nope, BWB.
You guys asked me to do so little on this show, and I can't even do that right. And since we have the bye week next week, he's back on popular demand anyway, because he's awesome, to recap the game and kind of, I guess, show me how it's done from a self-loathing fan perspective, being a Browns fan.
Okay, we are back with Jonathan Kinsley from Brickwall Blitz, Browns fan, deep ball connoisseur, and suffering watcher of sports. How you doing?
I'm doing good. How about yourself?
Doing well. So, I guess just to start off, what general thoughts do you have overall on the Browns game? Obviously, disappointing result for the Browns, but are you happy with what you saw, or do you think that this is going to get even worse before it gets better?
First halftime lead of the season, or close to halftime lead of the season, I guess?
I think first halftime lead of the season.
But,
mid-game.
That was the second halftime lead. They had one against the Jets in the third quarter of that game, and then completely gave that away. But we talked on the last podcast. Like I predicted there was going to be a shutout, like 31-0 is what I said. So I am pretty surprised that they were actually able to like lead the game for part-time. They were actually in the game for like 3.5 quarters, and then the defense just shot themselves in the foot. All the things you come to expect from the Browns. I also said that Kaiser would have like at least 3 turnovers. So imagine how surprised I am when I find out he has none. Overall, like I thought Kaiser played like pretty much like to the same level he's been playing all season. The accuracy is bad, but like he's been able to like hit tight windows whenever he's on. He's been able to hit the tight windows that the other Browns quarterbacks haven't been able to hit. Like for example, like he hit Ricardo Lewis for a really nice sideline completion, and also threw a really nice pass to Seth Valve that was dropped in the fourth quarter, and also showed some pocket movement that was outstanding. So it was the typical Viking, not typical Browns loss, which is like they were constantly driving, but just constantly shot themselves in the foot with fumbles, penalties, and drops.
Yeah, I really do think what kept the Browns in the game was the front seven, which we talked about leading up to the game, but ultimately the run defense really, really, really looked great. I loved what I saw from Jamie Collins. I loved what I saw from a couple of those young draft picks that are just now coming into their own. The secondary did a really nice job too. Buddy Calhoun showed why, he's been getting a lot of good press. Number 21, I forget. Oh yeah, I forget the name, but I kept noticing 21 making really good plays and being in really tight coverage. So the defense kind of kept the team in the game. I also think that the Browns were better prepared for the Dewey Field. It really looked like the Vikings were slipping all over, like they didn't have the right cleats or something, or Harrison Smith and Anthony Barr and Griffin specifically, I was watching them as they were trying to make cuts and react to Kaiser or Duke Johnson a lot, and it seemed like it took them like 2 extra steps to change direction, which makes me think that they didn't feel comfortable on that slippery field, which is a really, really big endorsement for the Browns coaching staff, as much as they've been under a lot of, as much criticism as they've gotten. I think that they were better prepared for the conditions, which is kind of an underrated thing that coaching staffs need to be held accountable for.
I was going to ask you guys about the slow start the Vikings defense had, and it looked like there was either some weird angles or missed tackles on like the Crowell touchdown, the first one.
Yeah, Anthony Harris missed one.
Is that what you're thinking, Luke? That it was just kind of a field thing, or
it was part of it.
My immediate thought was
there was also poor play.
The early morning, maybe.
Yeah,
just
there was also
production behind it.
Yeah, there was also just poor play, and there were good Browns offensive linemen beating our defensive linemen. Kaiser evading stuff in the pocket, and then the Crowell touchdown was a big hole opened up, and Anthony Harris took a bad angle and missed.
I agree with that. Like, I honestly expected the left tackle position to be a lot more beat up than it was. I mean, it don't get me wrong, it did give up pressure. Obviously, losing Joe Thomas makes that a big hole. But honestly, I was expecting like a lot more sacks from Griffin than just one. But at least he still has the sack streak rolling. So that's all we need from him at this point.
Yeah, I would give most of the credit for the lack of sacks to Kaiser. I think Next Gen Stats, there was a big conversation about Twitter on this. Next Gen Stats, which defines a pressure as anytime you get within a yard of the quarterback. That happened with Everson Griffin 12 times, which is astounding. That is unbelievable amount of pressure. And Kaiser was able to evade all but one of those instances, which is great.
They were also game planning away from trying to neutralize the...
There's a lot of chips going on, yeah.
Yeah, there's chips. Yeah. There was not slants, but I mean screen passes and passes into the flats. Just as early on in the game, you could see that they did not want the Vikings defense front to tee off on Kaiser, and it worked well. I thought for the Browns just to keep them in the game and give Kaiser some confidence and keep it going for that point that long.
Yeah, they let Tom Johnson have some one-on-one matchups, and he took advantage and got 2 sacks. That was a big factor. And he's had a really good year. He had a bad preseason and then a very good year.
Good for him.
Yeah.
And that's it.
I have to shout out Trey Waynes, who had a very good game. Granted, he did it against Bryce Treggs and Ricardo Lewis, but he played well. He was targeted a lot and managed to throw up some pass defense.
He did have a nice game. Yeah, I thought he played well, and it's kind of funny, you hear that in this part of the country, you hear the Trey Waynes saga every week, and so the guy has a decent game, and you don't really hear much about him because he's doing his job. So it's one of those positions that if you make a mistake, everybody's going to roast you, but you do your job and you have a good game, and everybody says, oh, whatever. So good for you to shout him out.
That's pretty much what it's like in Cleveland with Jamie Collins. No one acknowledges that he has a good game. Everyone thinks he's not playing as well as he was in New England, but he's been creating a lot of pressure. He's been he's been the bread and butter for the Browns defensive line since in Myles Garrett's absence. So I have no idea what Browns media is talking about when they're dissing Jamie Collins.
Yeah, and he's been playing hurt too, so he'll be fine. I feel like we need to acknowledge the fact that Jerick McKinnon is just better than Latavius Murray and has proven that over the last few weeks. And Murray's a fine bruiser or change of pace guy, but McKinnon should really be taking the lion's share of snaps.
Yeah,
Murray
good game 2 weeks ago, though. You can't ignore that.
Yeah, Murray was just unable to create against a Browns defense that was playing with very good gap discipline. Everybody was where they were supposed to be. And Murray was not able to make anybody miss. And the first guy got him down every time. He wasn't really able to get skinny through holes. He wasn't able to utilize misdirection. He wasn't able to read the play and improvise when the targeted gap wasn't there. Jerick McKinnon was, and the differences between the two running backs was hugely on display in this game.
He's averaging 100 yards, total yards a game now. I think McKinnon is, and it felt like
McKinnon is.
Yeah.
Is he?
Yeah, 100.3 since Cook got injured.
Yards from scrimmage, right?
Yeah.
Oh.
Not just on the ground, obviously, but it felt like they wanted to go to Murray early and they wanted to ride the hot hand or whatever, but it wasn't working, so they kind of just went back to their more diversified weapon that can do more. And we talked about this a couple weeks ago. Yeah, Jets. We've gotten into this. Obviously, he's not on the same stratosphere as Cook, but it's been really cool to see him kind of come in after the year he had last year and fill in so admirably.
He's going to be a starter.
Yeah, but I've always thought McKinnon was kind of an underrated receiving back. Obviously, since he's been playing under a terrible offensive line for so long, he hasn't really been able to thrive and get the gaps that he's wanted to have. But this year, with a better offensive line and a better scheme, he's been able to put up better stats. Like you said, he's been able to put up more scrimmage yards per game, and he's been able. People are beginning to see how versatile he is in comparison to Murray.
I kind of like them both as a tandem change of pace because they have distinctive styles and I don't know if it was kind of interesting 2 weeks ago against the Ravens how they featured Murray more, and I'm not sure why that is, if that was by design or they went with a hot hand or whatever the heck that is. But if you can keep a defense off balance with different looks from different running backs, it's successful for the Atlanta Falcons. It could be successful for the Vikings, and so far it has been.
Yeah, the offense looks a lot better than I guess we thought. I mean, granted, they had a slow start, and I was wondering what you guys think are the reasons. Granted, we're playing different defenses, and it's a different scheme every week, so you can't really blame it on one thing. But do you think that it's that Keenum takes a while to get going, or that the offensive line hasn't played together that long, so there's that component to it with all the injuries they've had and just in shuffling in general?
it could have been time, honestly. All that sleep science stuff is one thing, but they didn't really get moving until roughly 1 o'clock Central Time, roughly like 11 o'clock Central Time, which is an hour before they usually play. And there's just, something about the body that might, even after you've adjusted like to London time in, for a couple of days when you have to when you're asked to do athletic feats, it still might be hard. So I think that could have had something to do with it. It could have just been that the Browns played better at certain positions than they were expecting, and they needed to make adjustments over time.
It's even worse with food poisoning, just saying.
I bet.
I think it was a combination of how Case Keenum played, which was exactly how you would expect Case Keenum to play, like bad mistakes and good plays. And also, like what the Browns defensive line did, I thought Danny Sheldon in particular had a really phenomenal game. For example, like on like the lone sack that the Browns had, I think it was Carl Nassib. He created pressure on Case Keenum, but waited a bit so that Keenum couldn't go after the dump off, and that forced Keenum to hold on to the ball just a little bit longer and allow Nassib to get the sack. And that's something that's not going to show up on the stat sheet. That's something that I thought was really impressive. And he also had a really nice tackle for a loss. I think like the first or second play from the Vikings offense, and he also created pressure on a few occasions for Case Keenum as well. So I thought he was really good.
Jonathan, were you might even have touched on this earlier, but are you bolstered by the fact that Joe Thomas wasn't in the lineup and it wasn't a terrible game for the left tackle? I mean, does that give you, how's that? Does that give you a positive feeling for going forward with this team?
Yes and no. I think in time, like the left tackle is going to be like more of a liability because teams are going to figure out like how to like approach that. Although honestly, just go up to the left tackle and see what happens. But honestly, like I was surprised that like they didn't give up as much pressure as like I anticipated that it would, and I think it's. I got nothing for that. I'm just baffled by like how they did that.
It was pretty impressive, and I was also impressed by Joe Thomas's tweeting. He had a tweet from during the game about ripping on I think the Vikings touchdown celebration. So I was totally
the Thielen soccer celebration.
I'm not sure which one it was, but he says if you don't have or I think he said something along the lines, if you don't have a decent celebration, you shouldn't be awarded points or something like that. I can't remember. It was pretty funny.
I will say that
I liked Kaiser too, running around the stadium like he just scored a goal. That was really funny.
The soccer stuff was awesome, and it was great to see Thielen have his first touchdown of the season.
Absolutely, it's about time.
Wide open.
First touchdown?
Yeah, and he was like standing there for about
right. I had to look it up when I heard that. I was like, that cannot be right. He cannot have not had it. But yeah, he's been all yards.
Scored all year. Top receiver in the league, and he hasn't gotten the end zone. And he's just been patient. He's been patient and just keeps doing his job. It was really nice to see. Get
20-yard chunk plays, get us down to the one, and then have Jerick McKinnon busted in. Oh, can we talk about that jet sweep play call on the end on the goal line? That was so good.
Which one was that?
The Jerick McKinnon touchdown play, literally a jet sweep.
I was going to say.
It was him in motion, and he just came and took the handoff and then went in behind the center and left guard, who are both rookies, and it just felt really good, even though Isidore did not have a very good game. It felt good to watch Jerick McKinnon score a touchdown behind two rookie offensive linemen.
Absolutely. I also think the play call was pretty creative in itself. Pat Turner's been a really good offensive coordinator this year for what he's been able to do with the offensive line he has, the injuries that the Vikings have sustained, like Bradford and Cook, and I just think he's been doing a wonderful job with it.
Yes, which is bizarre. I'm still a little shell-shocked by that.
Well, Luke, I always go back to what you said a few weeks ago, which is when Shermer has all the pieces on the board and he does what he wants to do, he kind of overthinks. I don't know if you use that term or not, but...
It's not overthinks. It's that he has a tendency to go back to a system he thinks is good and it isn't.
Go. Yeah, and when he has to improvise, he's better. And I feel like that this team is a team that you're always going to have to improvise for because we just have so many injuries that it just seems like they're kind of just going for it. Maybe some of that
it's almost
is
as
Keenum
if
too. I don't know.
It's almost as if situations are forcing him to tailor his offense to his players, which is what you should be doing anyways. But he thinks that if all of his players are healthy, he can force them into his system, and instead of adapting to the actual talent he has on the field. So it's like injuries are like forcing him to do the thing offensive coordinators should do, which I don't know. I guess I'll take it. Whatever.
Yeah, it's been.
I mean, you're 6-2, so.
Yeah, it works.
Yeah, this is us when we're happy.
Yeah.
Diggs is.
Happy too. I get to see a bye.
Well, what do you? What do you? We were going to touch on this anyway, but I thought it was. We talked about this last week, and I wanted your opinion on what the local response was to like all the benchings that are going on with Kaiser. And just how disjointed that feels from like a coaching perspective. Then they go out this week and they basically complete a trade for a quarterback that doesn't go through because of like one of the most Browns things ever. We were debating off the air before you got on here whose fault that actually was. But if you could kind of explain that situation and then also like what the thoughts were on bringing in another quarterback, like you would figure if a team, at least from my perspective, is 0-8 going into the bye, like why make that move? Why not just ride out the rookie and then if he's terrible at the end of the year, move on?
Well, I also originally thought that it was because the Browns were too busy celebrating and didn't call in the trade. Apparently they did send it to the Bengals, but the Bengals sent it to the NFL without the Browns signature, only the Bengals signature. So it seemed like they screwed up on that, but it's just so bizarre. Like this front office, like this regime, like established itself making these forward-thinking moves to acquire draft picks and using like quote unquote analytics to acquire fresh young talent, established free agents, and then they do this. I've watched A.J. McCarron. I'm sure we all have at some point in our lives. It was not good. He's had a phenomenal offense at Alabama. He's also played with a phenomenal offense in Cincinnati during the postseason in 2015. He had A.J. Green, Marvin Jones, Tyler Eifert, and Mohamed Sanu all healthy and playing. And honestly, I was honestly pretty overwhelmed by what I saw. He has no arm strength. His accuracy is limited, and basically those are the two big things you need to be a quarterback in NFL, along with playing under pressure. So to come back to like why the Browns did this, I couldn't tell you why the Browns did this. This seems like a parody move that the old Browns would have made. And yeah, I know. I'm just thankful that like they had a Browns moment and didn't absolutely messed up the trade, which in part is not a Browns move because they didn't get a bad player and they didn't give the Bengals their second and third round picks, which makes it more bizarre for the Bengals because they had the offer, but apparently they didn't want the second or third round picks, or they did, but they just one of these teams messed up the processing on it. I'm getting lost as to who did, but that's my 2 cents on that.
It sounds like two Browns plays canceled each other out. It's like a negative times a negative. A bad move and then just a bad procedure equals
zero. Spontaneously combust.
We got a writer in town for the Star Tribune that's a Cleveland. He's from Cleveland, and I just hearing him talk about the Browns and their travails for the years, I feel bad for you. We certainly have our misery here in this town, so we can we can empathize to a certain degree. But and the Vikings were not too long, a while back. They messed up getting their picking in time at the draft, and were lucky to get the same person they wanted anyway. But you just think at this level that people have got their stuff together better than sometimes they show, and so we feel for you.
Never forget.
Yeah, that's why the Vikings are my backup team anyway.
Oh,
you're
a masochist, man.
I'll never forget that when the Jaguars skipped over us to pick that to make that pick, it was Byron Leftwich.
Whoa.
Oh God, how about that? And
we got Kevin Williams. What were you going to say, Jonathan?
How did that work out? How did that pick work out?
It was Kevin Williams.
So they landed on their feet.
Yeah, and Kevin Williams, Ring of Honor player, I think, or soon to be named one. Amazing defensive tackle for a while. I think the Panthers skipped over us and they took Jordan Gross.
I think Suggs was the pick after Williams, right? Because I wanted Suggs really bad instead of Williams, and I was at work and I saw that in the break room and I was really upset about it. And that's kind of splitting hairs between those two guys, but
Panthers got a really good offensive lineman in Jordan Gross, so it was that miss, but we still got the defensive tackle we were targeting.
So, Jonathan, before you got on the phone, we were talking about Luke wrote an article that is getting him death threats at this point about Case Keenum.
I got good comments, very good comments.
Yeah, man. The whole Case Keenum versus bringing Teddy back after the bye narrative, and we did kind of talk about this last week, but after watching Keenum against your squad last weekend, what are your thoughts just on what you think maybe Teddy could bring that Keenum doesn't have, or how the team might be better or worse off, I guess, should that move happen or if it doesn't happen?
Well, one thing that's similar about Case Keenum and Teddy Bridgewater is that they're both mobile quarterbacks. That cannot be denied. I said on last week's podcast that Keenum has more of this tendency to throw downfield, like that makes him a better fit in the offense that Pat Shurmur wants to run, which is this vertical passing offense that constantly pushes the ball downfield. Whereas when Teddy Bridgewater was running the offense under North Turner, they also made an attempt to throw downfield. But what Teddy brought to the table was these unstructured plays, but kind of like Case Keenum, but unlike Keenum, he was able to fit the ball in the tight windows. He was his accuracy was actually better downfield than Case Keenum, despite not really being this guy that you think would constantly want to push the ball downfield. I think obviously with Bridgewater, my stance on his first 2 seasons in the NFL, he's a much more consistent passer than Case Keenum. He's about as consistent as Bradford is, which you can take that either way you want, but I think both are good quarterbacks. But Teddy's kind of this guy that's able to be more of an improv player while also having kind of being like a refined passer, much like Bradford. I think probably my favorite example of him creating unstructured plays was this. I think it was an 11-yard run on Sunday Night Football against the Giants in 2015. Pretty sure you guys remember that. He was sliding to the left. He juked out this defender, and then he sprinted across the field, and it was third and 7, third and 8, and he got 3 yards past the first down marker, slid, and it was one of the most amazing runs I've ever seen.
Yeah,
so he's a very creative. Yeah. So he's a very creative runner, but he's not just a mobile quarterback. He's a really smart pocket passer. He's
clutch.
He's incredible in these short intermediate routes and aggressively attacking tight windows. He can throw with anticipation, which is something that Case Keenum can't do. So obviously with Case Keenum, you're going to want him because he's a guy that can play to his strengths. He can get the most out of his skill set. but going forward when Teddy's fully healthy, which could be anytime soon, you're going to want to put him in.
Yeah, man, there's all sorts of worry that maybe he'll be on the IR now and he won't come back, and just all sorts of stuff going on. So nothing's ever simple, you know. I think you know that probably better than anybody. Speaking of things not being simple, did you you mentioned before we started recording too that so Josh Gordon got reinstated this week,
yes.
And he can just come back and play?
He can practice on the 20th. He's conditionally reinstated for now, like kind of like how Martavis Bryant was at the beginning of the season. Like he didn't practice, he didn't play like in the first couple of preseasons. I don't think he actually played in the preseason, did he?
I don't know.
Josh Gordon, I think he played in.
No, Martavis Bryant.
No, Bryant.
Oh. I have no idea.
Sure. Like I think he played one game, but like that's beside the point. But with Gordon, I think he's gonna return to practice on the 20th, and he could be available for the final 5 games of the season, or he could not. Like this could all be a hoax or whatever. I don't know. I'm really hoping he's clean. Although personally, like marijuana shouldn't be illegal, but that's for another podcast.
Yeah. It was nice to see what David Stern said about that, since he was the guy who kind of championed getting that on the restricted list in the first place, to come out and say, you know, if it's legal in the state where they play, let them go at it, you know. It's not going to make them any better, so why bother blocking it?
It's kind of weird how we're like praising something that David Stern said. That's kind of ironic, isn't it?
Well, then you look at, you know, everything's done with context and perspective. So it's like a lot of people like Bush now just because they're looking at Trump and saying, well, what was I complaining about before? So
yeah, they're forgetting like they hated Bush.
Yeah, things can always get worse. I think is the motto of life and both the teams that we root for. Josh Gordon, though, man, he's such a... I mean, if he didn't have those problems, he's probably one of the most talented wide receivers to ever play the game. He's lit up the Vikings a couple years ago. We talked about that last week. He's always somebody that Vikings fans are hoping that somehow he'll end up here just because he's so damn good. But, you know, those demons are clearly hard to chase away if you're giving up, you know, millions and millions of dollars for them. So, you know... Hopefully,
if you're pairing up Gordon with Adam Thielen and Stephon Diggs, you should just give the Vikings like the Super Bowl already, because that's a heavenly matchup.
That's what I thought with Floyd, man, and then it's just been a whole lot of nothing.
It's almost as if he's been bad. He hasn't been good for like 2.5 years, and there was really no indication that he would suddenly regain that form.
How about you shut up? I'm a wishful.
We argued about this a lot in the preseason.
I'm a wishful misanthrope, I guess. I always just love putting together as many good wide receivers as possible. Looking at like Megatron coming out, the first thought in my mind was like, what if the Vikings got him? Like, even though there's no chance in hell that would ever happen, just the idea of it makes me happy.
Classic podcast.
Is he actually considering like playing again? I haven't really heard much about it.
Who, Megatron?
Yeah. I don't think he is.
No.
I think there was a whisper that somebody was trying to trade the rights to him, but it didn't seem like he was actually going to, invoke those rights.
It was that multiple teams had inquired to the Lions front office about what it would take to get his rights, and that was it.
Really that hard up for receivers in this league? What the heck?
And it was more of someone was up against a deadline, too, and needed a topic and decided to pour some gas on that, so... It turned into a bigger thing, but the Lions to reactivate him would cost them a fortune, and what do you get for him? It doesn't make any sense.
You should trade Rodney Adams to crying out.
Back on our practice squad.
Yeah, he's back. I was wondering
he made it through waivers.
Did he vlog it?
I don't know. I haven't checked on his YouTube channel in a while.
Did he vlog it? His reaction to getting cut? You guys wanted to talk about Duke Johnson too before we headed off to cry
I
ourselves to sleep.
love Duke.
He was really fun.
Yeah, he is. He's like I said on like last week's podcast. He was one of the more versatile backs in the league, and he's developed into kind of a slot receiver, which is what was the plan for the start of the season. Like we haven't really seen him in this slot role like as much ever since. And in fact, like he's basically being used as like a third down back, which I mean he's fantastic but he's much more than a third down back. He's a mismatch underneath. He has really good ball skills. He's nimble. He's got a nice burst, and I don't know. I just don't know why they're not using it as much. I mean, he's gotten some opportunities. He had like 2 really good runs on like one drive. I think like one where he like ran into this like brick wall of Vikings defenders and just somehow was able to find his way around it. It was like 5 yards, but he got the first down and it made like a big play out of nothing. I don't know, just they really need to get him involved more. They also need to get Njoku and DeVal involved more. I'm perfectly aware they had like a couple of like really bad drops, but they're also probably the best skill players you have in the offense as well. So you got to do that.
What do you think, Luke?
I mean, I see Duke Johnson, and I see in him what I wish Latavius Murray was better at. He's just such a creative runner, both in the way of like creative as in coming up with ways to find yardage, and creative as in he creates opportunities for himself. There's one play that I can't stop thinking about when I think about Duke Johnson, where I think he was it was a toss right or a sweep right or something. It was an outside run to the right, and Harrison Smith diagnosed it immediately and came in just flying. And Duke Johnson juked him out and was able to, I believe, pick up the first down in a short yardage situation. And juking out Harrison Smith and forcing him to miss a tackle is no easy feat. Duke Johnson is incredible. I don't have much of an evaluation on Isaiah Crowell, but yeah, I think the offense would be much better if they let it run through Duke Johnson like the Cardinals did last year with David Johnson. I don't know much about Njoku. I have a weird soft spot for Seth DeValve because of a joke that they like to make on the Around the NFL podcast about him, where Mark Sessler is obsessed with Seth DeValve, and Seth DeValve is the future of the franchise, and I think that's amazing. But I do like what I see from both of those players in terms of just like receiver production, or what I saw in that one game. I haven't really watched much other Browns. The drops are obviously bothersome, but sometimes you just gotta keep going at them and work through it.
Yeah, sometimes you don't want to trade for AJ McCarron either, which they try to.
I will say on that regard, I do see the logic in just trying to acquire quarterbacks because, I think we get wrapped up in narratives because to a degree, people who watch football, we're used to the old school idea of football where if you don't show confidence in your quarterback, he'll get all in a mental funk. But when it comes to just the nuts and bolts, it's better to have another option at quarterback who isn't, Kevin Hogan. That kind of makes sense to me. What if AJ McCarron is actually really good, and then it just means you didn't need to worry about it. And if Kaiser needed time to develop, now he either has time to develop or you don't need to worry about it, and that'd be great. I don't think he's very good. I think it's a misevaluation to offer a second and a third for him. That's kind of insane. So the Browns dodged a bullet in that way, but I don't think that the Browns should just stop looking for quarterbacks and wait for Deshaun Kaiser to prove whether or not he's good. If they're really like a money kind of thing.
Can you dodge a bullet that you shot?
Evidently, yeah.
The Browns
suicide. Like suicide.
The Browns are breaking the laws of physics from week to week. That's really all you can ask from your local team. So we're up against the clock here. Is there anything else that you guys wanted to mention before we get into the doldrums of the bye? Mr. Joe?
You mean like the Redskins defense? I mean, not defense, like team.
Well, we'll touch on them a little bit next week since we don't have a whole lot to talk about anyway, and we all personally dislike each other. Very, very
Jonathan,
much.
do you have any content coming out you want to plug?
I'm all about that.
Yeah, that's a good question. Do you want to plug any articles you got coming up? You should definitely plug your Twitter and your website and stuff.
Let's. In terms of articles, I think I'm writing. I mean, for current ones, like I have the Everson Griffin Defensive Player of the Year one that I wrote a while back. That I think Vikings fans would obviously enjoy a lot. As far as projects in the future, I think I'm gonna try and write something on the Eagles' offense. Try and write something on Stephon Diggs or Adam Thielen.
Where can they find your Griffin article?
Brickwallblitz.com. I think it's actually the last article I've written so far. I've been pretty busy with work and school.
And there's not a whole lot to get excited about on the Browns front. Anyways, that's your is that your Twitter handle too? It's at
yes.
Brickwallblitz.
At Brickwallblitz.
All right.
Yep.
And
I have. You should all go check out the Case Keenum article that I wrote. Leave a comment. Join the war that is going on in the comment section of that article.
You want more. You wanted some
I
more.
do. Yeah, leave me a mean comment. If you think I wrote crap, yeah, leave me a mean one. I love it. It fuels me. This coming week, I'm probably going to write about the offensive line, just the differences between last year and this year, and where it's coming from, and kind of where we went right, and where we still have time to improve.
what about you, OG?
Oh, we have the Baikus article coming up. A throwback to the old Vikings Journal bi-week tradition of writing Vikings haikus, and I've contacted Bo Mitchell, and he's gonna who used to do this on his old website. So it's a tradition that I'm bringing forward to Purple PTSD. So look for those; they'll be fun coming out this weekend.
I love it.
All right.
And I'll just be writing hyperbolic nonsense pretty much every morning around 6 a.m. So keep an eye out for that. Follow us on Twitter and Facebook at Purple PTSD. Follow our sister site, VikingsTerritory.com. And we will be back next week with the bye edition. The Vikings will still be 6-2, and we'll still be miserable. So thanks for listening, and